range of responses that you've gotten from audiences who've seen your performances?
I've been very surprised at how good the responses have been. I mean, they were real, because Butoh is quite shocking initially. It is quite, it begins from a contorted, somewhat grotesque place. And the reason for that is that by twisting the body out of its normal, socially acceptable patterns of movement. So we try to get away from doing movements that we've ever done before. We always look to find movements that are brand new, that come from a deeper, primal, childlike place. I think the spectator needs to be somewhat educated. So either with something they would read or an announcement before they come out, and they should be open and just let their senses respond. So the more the spectator can watch a Butoh performance with a blank state of mind, as it were, not unreceptive, not dulled, but just completely open without judgment, and then feel, and don't try to make sense of the performance.
Relationship to the music?
What it has to be is almost a spiritual connection between, and I'll use the example of George Davies, who I work with not exclusively but more than anyone else, and he's my soulmate as a friend and as a performing artist and a creative person on these projects. And I think what George and I have is very magical, because we don't need to, we understand the things that interest us, and we may, you know, he might like one thing and I don't, but we can still come together on the things that matter, the bigger picture of it. And that kind of identity, it's very rare. George works like I do. I work to make movements that I've never made before, and make discoveries that are new, and or face things that are frightening, or the worst aspect of my personality, like a jealousy or anger or envy, and I'll approach that and say, I'm going to dance that now, and I know he can play that. You know, he finds it from within, and especially I love working with George because he uses instruments that, aside from a guitar and other recognizable instruments, he'll make instruments in his circuit bending, which is, you know, capsulized description is taking like a child's toy, an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and a little musical thing, and he rewires this into, you know, he can make the growls of the devil's bowels in hell, or he can make it in choir of angels singing just by spinning a knob, and so he's able to find sounds in unpredictable places.
Tell me, how does a new piece start? You don't choreograph your movements, or do you? And how does that whole process unfold?
Start with a simple word like bones, and then I would loosely make some notes on you know, what does bones really mean? The bones of dead relatives, the bones of animals, the bones that are within our own body, and so I would leap around, and I keep using that word leap because it's so important to Butoh process, is being free to leap to a new idea. So you might be transforming into like a little old Greek fisherwoman, and then you would transform or leap into an eagle soaring, and then transform again. And by letting yourself, sometimes you transform, you don't know where you're going. So you'll go here, and then I have like an insect will emerge. And I didn't plan consciously, oh, I'm going to do insect third, and then Greek fisherwoman fourth, and then like this movement, fifth, sometimes they come out, and if you have that openness to let it happen. I mean, they can start from a poem. I can read a poem and get an essence from the poem, and I say, I love that feeling. It's full of sadness and regret and longing, and I want to dance that feeling. Put the poem aside, and maybe in the silence in my pajamas in the living room, I'll dance the poem that I just read and the feeling, and then 100 new connections are made within that dance. It's such a wide range of people that influenced me personally. As to be a performer in general, it was certain sports figures when I was really young, and then later on it was Jim Morrison of the Doors was a big influence on me. Young Mick Jagger. I mean, I wanted to be those people, and I couldn't sing. I didn't play an instrument well enough, and so I started saying, well, I can feel the spirit they have, and I'd act them out in my room. And I was an only child, so I grew up spending a lot of time acting out things in my room, or in the barn, or in the field. And so my early influences were sort of pop icons, and then theatrically, I was definitely influenced by the avant-garde, by the surrealists, the musicians that were leaning towards more edgy, darker material. I wasn't into so much the hold hands up with people, let's all feel good, or the party all night, the R&B stuff. I tended to lean more towards the Pink Floyds and the musically. And so along with that, then in theater, I was influenced by Grotowski, by certainly Marcel Marceau, by groups like the Living Theater, theater that was not afraid to kind of dig down and explore the darker side of the human condition. So when Butoh came to me, it was quite late in life, that although it existed, it was in around another part of the world. And so my big influences also were poets. Artaud was a very big influence, although he was completely mad. I think he was also a genius in his view that theater needed to be a physical ritual sacrifice to the gods, as it were, and he was tired of the intellectual theater in France at the time, that just talking heads sitting around. He wanted a theater that expressed the desire of mankind. And so when I realized that there was an art form like that called Butoh, I went, yes.
About how you develop the costumes for your pieces.
Butoh costumes are often, in the early days of, in the 60s and 70s, the early days of Japanese Butoh, they wore inside-out kimonos and the worker peasant rags, and the more worn out and torn they were, the more interesting they became. And that comes into the wabi-sabi aspect of something old and worn out and lived and loved in, or leaned upon, or where a horse has rubbed its snout for 15 years and there's a hole in the post. That kind of worn out feeling is really great for Butoh.
If you could only say a few words to a new Butoh student, what would you say?
I would say you have to be very brave, because this is an art form that requires you to look deeper into yourself than you might normally be comfortable doing. You cannot just rely on being pretty or handsome or young or rich. You have to rely on being truthful and honest with who you are and explore the aspects of yourself that are frightening to you and those that are least pleasurable and things in your past that you've hidden in order to find an authentic Butoh dance. So my advice would be, but you're in for a wonderful adventure that can last you a lifetime, whether it's just experiencing a workshop and then viewing Butoh or seeing, because all the world is Butoh, even if you never see a performance, really. It's just seeing and experiencing the world around you in a slightly deeper and more appreciative way. So it'll enhance you. But if you want to choose it as a career, it's vastly rewarding artistically, if not financially.